mean he is escaping. Srila Prabhupada continued to vigorously develop his theme. He argued variously, and yet in a delightful way, showing the fortune of one who becomes a servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The devotees could not refrain from smiling and laughing as they hurried to keep up with his pace and with his Krishna-conscious logic. Prabhupada: I was a student of economics. There we learned Marshall's theory. He says that human nature is such that unless a person has obligation, he will not work. That is the economics. If one already has something sufficient to eat, then he will not work. So if we have sufficient to eat, why shall we work? What is the answer? This is not escaping, it is coming to the light. To not work and yet get our necessities is comfort. But to work hard just to get the bare necessities of life, that is for the hogs and dogs. Devotee: they have no faith or trust that this can be done. Prabhupada: see us, you rascals, see, open your eyes, see that we have no business. We have no food stock. Still we are not worried. We do not know what we shall eat in the evening, but still we are not worried. I came to your country without any subsistence. Prabhupada argued that man's economic necessities could be easily settled by keeping cows and land. He said that men have made an unnecessary complex arrangement just for maintaining the body, thereby forgetting the purpose of human life. When a devotee contended that not everyone had the opportunity to get land, Prabhupada said that this was simply mismanagement. There was plenty of land in America. Devotee: Srila Prabhupada, they accuse us of being parasites. Srila Prabhupada: no, a parasite means if he takes others' property and tries to enjoy it. But we are not enjoying others' property. We are enjoying our Father's property. Ishavasya midam sarvam. Krishna is the proprietor. Why do you say parasite? We are good children of Krishna, and Krishna says, don't work, I shall give you everything. Actually, Krishna says that, why are you working so hard? Just surrender to me, and I will give you protection, whatever you want. So we are giving everything. Why say parasite? Srila Prabhupada ki. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to read the next paragraph because it finishes the section. The devotees were well aware that Srila Prabhupada did work, traveling constantly, managing his worldwide Krishna conscious society, rising in the middle of the night to translate Srimad Bhagavatam. And his disciples also worked hard. But they did not work like animals and animal-like persons for things that would be destroyed in time. And they did not work at horrible enterprises that ruined the best part of human nature. They did not work like asses and claim they had no time left in the day to chant the holy name of God. So today, I've been asked to speak about two Vaishnavacharyas whose disappearance day it is today. The disappearance days of Bhugarba Goswami and Kasisvara Pandit. And They were both intimately associated with the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, and they also both had disciples who were pujaris in the Sri Govindaji temple in Vrindavan. So I'm going to read from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, chapter 8, text 50 to 72. And then I'm going to speak a little bit about what I've read about them. There's not a lot written about these 2 Goswamis, but because they're very closely related to the 6 Goswamis, then I'm going to speak a little about the pastimes in relationship to the Goswamis. So, Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare. So this chapter is called "The Author Receives the Orders of Krishna and Guru." And it's about the author of this book, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj, how he first became inspired to write this great biography of Lord Chaitanya. So it's describing a time in Vrindavan, sometime after the disappearance of Lord Chaitanya, and also after Vrindavan Das Thakur and Lochan Das Thakur had both written biographies of Lord Chaitanya. So it's the events leading up to the writing of this book. So I'm just going to read the translations of the first few verses. In Vrindavan, in a great place of pilgrimage, underneath the desire trees, is a golden throne bedecked with jewels. On that throne sits the son of Nandamaraj, Sri Govindadeva, the transcendental Cupid. Varieties of majestic service are rendered to Govinda there. His garments, ornaments, and paraphernalia are all transcendental. In that temple of Govindaji, thousands of servitors always render service to the Lord in devotion. Even with thousands of mouths, one could not describe this service. In that temple, the chief servitor was Sri Haridas Pandit. His qualities and fame are known all over the world. He was gentle, tolerant, peaceful, magnanimous, grave, sweet in his words, and very sober in his endeavors. He was respectful to everyone and worked for the benefit of all. Diplomacy, envy, and jealousy were unknown to his heart. The 50 qualities of Lord Krishna were all present in his body. In one of his unflinching devotional faith in Krishna, all the good qualities of Krishna and the demigods are consistently manifested. However, one who has no devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead has no good qualifications, because he is engaged by mental concoction and material existence, which is the external feature of the Lord. Anantaracharya was a disciple of Gadadhar Pandit. His body was always absorbed in love of Godhead. He was magnanimous and advanced in all respects. Anantaracharya was a reservoir of all good qualities. No one can estimate how great he was. Pandit Haridas was his beloved disciple. Pandit Haridas had great faith in Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda. Therefore, he took great satisfaction in knowing about their pastimes and qualities. He always accepted the good qualities of Vaishnavas and never found fault in them. He engaged his heart and soul only to satisfy the Vaishnavas. He always heard the reading of Sri Chaitanya Mangal, and all the other Vaishnavas used to hear it by his grace. Like the full moon, he illuminated the entire assembly of Vaishnavas by speaking Sri Chaitanya Mangal, and by the nectar of his qualities, he increased their transcendental bliss. By his causeless mercy, he ordered me to write about the last pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Govinda Gosai, the priest engaged in the service of Lord Govinda in Vrindavan, was a disciple of Kasisvara Gosai. There was no servant more dear to the Govinda deity. Sri Yadavacharya Gosai, a constant associate of Srila Rupa Goswami, was also very enthusiastic in hearing and chanting about Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. Bhugarba Gosai, a disciple of Pandit Gosai, was always engaged in topics regarding Lord Chaitanya, knowing nothing else. Among his disciples were Chaitanya Das, who was a priest of the Govinda deity, as well as Mukundananda Chakravarti and the great devotee Krishna Das. Among the disciples of Anantaracharya was Shivananda Chakravarti, in whose heart Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda constantly dwelled. In Vrindavan, there were also many other great devotees, all of whom desired to hear the last pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. By their mercy, all these devotees ordered me to write of the last pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because of their order only, although I am shameless, I have attempted to write this Chaitanya Charitamrita. So I'm going to read two purports now. I'll read, we can go through the Sanskrit for the last one, which is text 72. More Agya Karila Sabe Karuna Kariya More Agya Karila Sabe Karuna Kariya More Agya Karila Sabe Karuna Kariya Tan Sabara Bole Diki Nirlajja Hayya Tan Sabara Bole Diki Nirlajja Hayya More Agya Karila Sabe Karina Kariya Tan Sabara Bole Diki Nirlajja Hayya More Agya Karila Sabe Karina Kariya Tan Sabara Bole Diki Nirlajja Hayya More Agya Karila Sabe Karuna Kariya Tan Sabara Bole Diki Nirlajja Hayya
More Agya Karila Sabe Karuna Kariya
More Agya Karila Sabe Karuna Kariya
Tan Sabara Bole Diki
Chansabara bole leke nilaja. Muriyagya karila sabe karuna kariya. Chansabara bole leke nilaja. Muriyagya karila sabe karuna kariya. Chansabara bole leke nilaja. Vaishnavis. More, answer me. Agya, order. Karila, cave. Sabe, all. Karuna, merciful. Kariya, doing so. Tansabara, all of them. Bole, by the order. Liki, by right. Nilaja, without shame. Aiya, becoming. Translation. By their mercy, all these devotees ordered me to write of the last pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because of their order only, although I am shameless, I have attempted to write this Chaitanya Charitamrita. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. To write about the transcendental pastimes of the Supreme Personality Godhead is not an ordinary endeavor. Unless one is empowered by the higher authorities or advanced devotees, one cannot write transcendental literature, for all such literature must be above suspicion, or in other words, it must have none of the defects of conditioned souls, namely mistakes, illusions, cheating, and imperfect sense perceptions. The words of Krishna and of the disciplic succession that carries the orders of Krishna are actually authoritative. To be empowered to write transcendental literature is a privilege in which a writer can take great pride. As a humble Vaishnava, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, being thus empowered, felt very much ashamed that it was he who was to narrate the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I was born in the darkest ignorance. My spiritual master has forced up my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I have my respectful obeisances unto him. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Shapatami Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Dharmayam Tadati Swapadantikam. When Srila Rupa Goswami was established within this world, the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, give me shelter at his lotus feet. Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripasindubhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. I have my respectful obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord who can fulfill the desires of everyone. They are full of they can fulfill the desires of everyone just like desire trees, and they are full of compassion for all the fallen conditioned souls. So, as it said here, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami felt very much ashamed that it was he who was to narrate the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, it's described that different persons are sometimes recognized by the regalia they wear. Like government officials are recognized by different uniforms, sometimes different badges on hats, or sometimes like a mayor wears a kind of chain around his neck. So it's said that a great devotee of God, his ornament by which he's recognized is his humility. And one of the most important verses in our Vaishnava literature, Trinadapi Sanichana Tarodapi Sahishana Amanina Manadina Kirtaniya Siddhahari. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respects unto others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. So, Lord Chaitanya, he indicated that this verse is like the chain that a devotee wears around his neck. It's the ornament of a devotee. Here, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he's displaying that humility. That he, in the presence of all of the other humble devotees who were engaged in the service of Krishna, especially under Rupa Goswami's direction in the Sri Radha Govindaji temple, and in their association, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami felt very humble. He was very old, he was virtually blind and very weak, so he was unable to render direct service to the deity. He wasn't one of the pujaris, and he was not very strong. So he was feeling that all of these other devotees were more qualified than him. However, because he'd had a lot of personal association with Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, who was an intimate associate of Lord Chaitanya, and then it was considered that Krishnadas Goswami was the most qualified to relate the pastimes, to write down the pastimes which had not been previously written down by Vrindavan Das Thakur and Lochan Das Thakur. So I'm also going to read now from the purport to text 66, which describes some of the pastimes or some of the details of the life of Kasisvara Pandit. Kasisvara Gosaira Shishya Govind Gosai Govindera Priya Sevak Tanra Samanai. Govinda Gosai, the priest engaged in the service of Lord Govinda in Vrindavan, was a disciple of Kasisvara Gosai. There was no servant more dear to the Govinda deity. Purport. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anubhashya, Kasisvara Gosai was one of the contemporaries of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was with the Lord in Jagannath Puri. Also known as Kasisvara Pandit, he was a disciple of Ishwara Puri and son of Vasudev Bhattacharya, who belonged to the dynasty of Kanjilala Kanu. His surname was Chaudhry. His nephew, his sister's son, who was named Rudra Pandit, was the original priest of Vallabhapur, which is situated about 1 mile from the Sri Rampur railway station in the village of Chatara. Installed there are the deities of Radha Govinda and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Kasisvara Gosai was a very strong man, and therefore when Lord Chaitanya visited the temple of Jagannath, he used to protect the Lord from the crowds. Another of his duties was to distribute prasadam to the devotees after kirtan. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur visited this temple at Vallabhapur. At that time, the person in charge was a Shaivite. Sri Shivananda Chaudhary, who was a descendant of Kasisvara Gosai's brother. In Valarupur, there was a permanent arrangement to cook 9 kilos of rice, vegetables, and other foodstuffs daily. And near the village, there is sufficient land which belonged to the deity on which this rice was grown. Unfortunately, the descendants of Kasisvara Gosai's brother have sold a major portion of this land, and therefore the deity worship has now been hampered. It is said in the Gaura Ganadesha Dipika that the servant of Krishna in Vrindavan, named Bringara, descended as Kasisvara Gosai during the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In our household life, we also sometimes visited this temple of Vallabhapur and took prasadam there at noon. The deities of this temple, Shri Radha Govinda and Gauranga Vigraha, are extremely beautiful. Near Vallabhapur is a beautiful temple of Jagannath. We sometimes used to take prasadam in this Jagannath temple also. These two temples are situated within a 1-mile radius of the Sri Rampur railway station near Calcutta. So there's very little information other than this about Kasisvara Pandit, but there's one very interesting pastime that our acharyas have passed on to us. And that is that it's described that Kasisvara Pandit was a disciple of Ishwara Puri, and therefore Lord Chaitanya considered him a godbrother. And also another disciple of Ishwara Puri was Govinda Das. So after when Lord Chaitanya went to Jagannath Puri, then initially there weren't a lot of devotees traveling with him. Initially there was just like 5 or 6 devotees went with him to Jagannath Puri. And so Ishwara Puri sent Kasisvara Pandit and Govinda Das to Jagannath Puri to serve Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya didn't want to accept any service from his godbrothers, but Ishwara Puri insisted that he should accept that service. So as it's described here, Kasisvara Pandit was very strong, and he was able to protect Lord Chaitanya from the enthusiasm of the crowds who came to see him dancing, or the crowds who came to, also when he was in the Jagannath temple, then it was often a very busy place. And because Lord Chaitanya wanted just to be completely absorbed in his meditation on Jagannath, and then Ishwara Puri, understanding this situation, arranged for Kasisvara Pandit to protect him. However, there's one very interesting pastime in relation to this, and that is that at one time, Lord Chaitanya was standing in a very crowded arti, or a darshan of Lord Jagannath in the Lord Jagannath's temple in Puri. And one small lady, she climbed onto Lord Chaitanya's shoulders so that she could see Lord Jagannath more clearly. And this is like, for anyone to do such a thing, to anybody, would have been considered very rude. And to do it to a renounced monk was considered extremely improper. And so Lord Chaitanya's servants immediately reprimanded the lady. And but Lord Chaitanya said, Lord Chaitanya said, I wish I had as much enthusiasm to see Krishna as this lady did, in the sense that she was so enthusiastic to see Krishna. She was obviously a great devotee of Krishna, so she understood the etiquette that should be observed in relationship to Krishna's devotees. And yet her attachment for seeing Krishna was so great, and that she, there was no thought in her mind that I'm going to commit an offense. It was just, I'm going to see Krishna whatever it takes. So because Lord Chaitanya is teaching that mood of eagerness, to how to develop that eagerness to gain Krishna's darshan, and then he glorified that lady as being highly advanced. So Kasisvara Pandit, obviously, not only because he was a godbrother of Lord Chaitanya, and not only because he was following the order of his guru to serve Lord Chaitanya as Lord Chaitanya's bodyguard, but also because he had so much direct personal service, and he was present during all of Lord Chaitanya's intimate pastimes with Lord Jagannath and Jagannath Puri. Then you can imagine he was extremely attached to the Lord. And Sri Lord Chaitanya asked Kasisvara Pandit to go to Vrindavan. When Lord Chaitanya heard that Rupa Goswami had discovered the deity of Govindaji, which had been lost for thousands of years in Vrindavan, then he asked Kasisvara Pandit to go to Vrindavan to assist Rupa Goswami in maintaining the deity worship there. So Kasisvara Pandit refused to go because he couldn't bear thinking of being separated from Lord Chaitanya. So Lord Chaitanya, understanding his sentiment, he gave a deity of himself to Kasisvara Pandit. He said, you can take my deity and worship me every day in this form. And Kasisvara Pandit still refused. So then Lord Chaitanya asked Kasisvara Pandit to bring some foodstuff to offer to the deity. Actually, this was another service of Kasisvara Pandit. He was the devotee entrusted with distributing prasadam to the devotees in Jagannath Puri. So Kasisvara Pandit brought very nice prasadam and offered it to this deity of Lord Chaitanya, and also offered it to Lord Chaitanya. So both Lord Chaitanya and the deity both sat down and took the prasadam in full view of Kasisvara Pandit. So then Kasisvara Pandit understood that this deity is non-different from Lord Chaitanya, and that I'll have Lord Chaitanya with me constantly throughout my life. So then he went with the deity to Vrindavan, and that deity was installed along with Govindaji in the Radha Govindaji temple, and that deity is still worshipped today in Jaipur, along with Govindaji and along with Radha Govindaji in Jaipur. And the name of the deity is Gaura Govinda. So it's the Gaura Govinda deity. Bhugarba Goswami, he was in Navadvip, and there's no description of his childhood, but he became a friend of a very famous devotee of Krishna, Lokanath Goswami, who established the Radha Vinod deity in Vrindavan. And Lokanath was also the spiritual master of Narottam Das Thakur. So when Lokanath Goswami came to Mayapur in 1510, and then this was just prior to Lord Chaitanya taking sannyas, and it was Lord Chaitanya's intention at that time to go to Vrindavan. And so he he asked Lokanath to go to Vrindavan and that he would soon come there. So Lokanath and Lokanath's very close associate Bhugarba Goswami, they both went to Vrindavan, awaiting the arrival of Lord Chaitanya. But then after Lord Chaitanya took sannyas, his mother requested that he could go instead to Jagannath Puri. So Lord Chaitanya went to Jagannath Puri. And when Lokanath Goswami heard this, then he actually he became very disappointed, and he went to Jagannath Puri to see Lord Chaitanya. And then by the time he got to Jagannath Puri, Lord Chaitanya had gone on yatra of South India. So he went all the way to South India and he didn't meet him. And then he came back to Vrindavan, and Lord Chaitanya had already been to Vrindavan and left again. So then Lokanath Goswami got the message from Lord Chaitanya that he should stay in Vrindavan. That was the service that was requested of him. So Lokanath Goswami and Bhugarba Goswami, they actually did like parikrams throughout Braj. At that time there was no temples established by the Goswamis. And they were eager to find out the places of Krishna's pastimes, but they had no means to do so, no like material means. So they would just go wander throughout Raj, calling out the names of the 12 forests of Raj, like Hey Talavan, Hey Bandiravan, Hey Lohavan, Hey Mahavan, like this. And it's described that seeing their eagerness to associate with these pastime places, then Srimati Vrindadevi, who is the personification of Tulsi Devi, but who is also the devotee who supervises the movements of the trees and the plants and all of the animals who partake in Krishna's pastimes. And she actually revealed the places of these forests. So they were so in that way, gradually, so that when Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami came to Vrindavan to establish the deities, by that time the forests of Vrindavan were established. So they had some idea where the different pastimes were. So this was the main service of Bhugarba Goswami. So I'll stop there. And any questions? Shri Bhugarba Goswami ki, Shri Kasisvara Pandit ki, Shri Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami ki, Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki, Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Anantagoti Vaishnavinda ki. Well, it's not there's no conclusion. There's two different versions as to why. All right, well, since Raghunath asked the question, why is he called Bhugarba Goswami? Well, there's a verse in a book called Shaka Nirnaya, like written shortly after these pastimes, where it's stated that Bhugarba Goswami, the great Vaishnava, he took birth from the bowels of the earth. But there's no actual, from the womb. The word Bhugarba means the womb of the earth. So as we know, some like elevated souls, great Vaishnavas, sometimes have very amazing birth pastimes. But there's no discussion of it anywhere in Shastra what that actually means. And then there's another, just one account to say that Bhugarba Goswami, he did his bhajan in like a tunnel which he dug into the ground, and So in that sense, he was like embraced by the earth when he was doing his bhajan. So the earth was like a womb for him, Bhugarba. But there's no information, or there's no conclusion amongst our acharyas which of those two, or whether it's both of them. Don't know whether he was called Bhugarba Goswami before he dug the hole in the ground, you see, or what. It's not described there. But his association with Lokanath Goswami is the most. Just to mention, his samadhi is in the courtyard of the Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan, next to Rupa Goswami's samadhi. And Kasisvara Pandit's samadhi is in the 64 samadhis in Vrindavan. Wow.